Good evening, everyone. I am so excited for what we have in store for our perfect Wednesday evening. My name is Stephanie. I am the director of events for the Novel Neighbor. If you are not familiar with us, we're a women-owned and independently operated business located in Webster Groves, aka St. Louis, Missouri. And we have been looking forward to this evening for quite some time. We are very excited to be part of the international launch for this incredible author and her book. And I've already gotten a glimpse as to what we might be talking about between these two authors this evening. And it's going to be a great time. I am thrilled. First, I want to say if you have not picked up a copy of Some Shall Break, which we are celebrating a book birthday for Ellie Marney this evening, we do ship internationally as well as nationally. All of those details can be found online, so we can still get a copy of this book into your hands. My favorite thing that has happened this week is that our owner of the bookstore, her daughter has definitely always been a reader. How can you not be a little bit with your mother owning a bookstore? But there's very few books that I've ever seen her get so excited about. And she walked in the other day and was like, Mom, how could you not tell me that you were hosting a virtual event with Ellie Marney? That's one of my favorite books I've ever read in my entire life. I didn't know there was a sequel. How could you not tell me? To which, so we all got yelled at for. And so we're thrilled. So ringing endorsement from Sadie, and I think that's basically what anybody needs to know to pick up this series. So before we get into talking a little bit more about Some Shall Break, Ellie Marney is being joined this evening by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, who we have been lucky enough to host in St. Louis before. She is absolutely incredible. She's a TikTok sensation. You all know her and love her. She is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of more than 20 acclaimed young adult novels, including the Inheritance Game series, which I have my signed and personalized set right here, as well as Little White Lies, Deadly Little Scandals, The Lovely and the Lost, and the Natural series, which contains The Naturals, Killer Instinct, All In, Bad Blood, and the e-novella 12. Jen is also a Fulbright scholar with advanced degrees in psychology, psychiatry, and cognitive science. She received her PhD from Yale University and spent many years as professor of psychology and professional writing. You can follow her online at jenniferlynnbarnes.com or on her Twitter at @JenLynnBarnes. So we're very excited that she is joining, again, Ellie Marney, celebrating an international launch for Some Shall Break. Truly incredible. Ellie has so many amazing books. This is the follow-up to None Shall Sleep, but we also absolutely love and enjoy The Killing Code. So if you did not know that The Killing Code exists, please check that out. We also have that on our shelves. Ellie Marney is also a New York Times bestselling author for crime thrillers, including The Killing Code, None Shall Sleep, White Knight, No Limits, the Every series, and the Circus Heart series. Her books have been published in 10 countries and optioned for television. She spent a lifetime researching in mortuaries, interviewing law enforcement officers, talking to autopsy specialists, and asking former spies about how to make explosives from household items. So very casual, obviously. She now lives quite sedately in southeastern Australia with her family. You can follow Ellie at elliemarney.com. So Ellie, Jen, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah. So thrilled to be here to celebrate with Ellie.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right. I am so excited.
Hey, Jen, how are you going?
Book. It's good. Good. I have a giant list of questions here. I'm like, spoiler alert. Can't show you.
I seem to be muted, or I can't hear at the moment.
Can hear you.
I'm just going to talk very briefly about the book. Hey, Stephanie, how are you going? If you could get me back, Jen, that would be amazing.
Okay.
You can hear me, Jen? That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to have to leave the studio and rejoin, but I'll be back with you in just a second.
Okay, so I guess it's just me for a few minutes while we're waiting for Ellie to rejoin. So I can tell you some of the reasons I'm super excited for this event. I have always loved police procedurals. So when I was in my last year of grad school, I did nothing but write my dissertation, read historical romance novels, and watch police procedurals. I think I watched 9 seasons of NCIS, 5 of Bones, 6 of Criminal Minds, just an unbelievable number. And this series captures so much of what I love about the crime solving side of that, but also has like all of these interesting settings, details, characters, and depth. So I'm super excited to get to discuss it tonight. I've just been talking about all the wonderful things about your book while you were gone, Ellie. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. That's really
Wonderful.
nice. I cannot really see you, but that's okay. I saw you a little bit earlier, and that was really nice to get a glimpse of you before. Um, I wasn't here, so what did you say? Was it something
I
good?
was just talking about my longstanding love of police procedurals and how much of the investigative part is captured in your books, but also how much more is captured
Yeah.
in the books.
I was going to spend a long time. I mean, look, I've all of my books seem to be really research heavy, and so I did end up spending a little bit of time, like getting really pedantic about the procedural details for this because it was set so long ago, and because I kind of nerd out over those sorts of details. The stuff that happened in like 1982, the forensic aspects and the police investigation stuff that
I
happened.
love the way it's set
Yeah.
at this time when all of this is emerging
Yeah.
and it's all new and being developed, and just that historical element of it is so cool.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming a lot of the people here have read book one and know about it. But in case anyone doesn't, my first question, I wanted you to take us back. What was the origin story of the first book in this series? Like when you came up with this idea, kind of where did it come from and what was that initial spark?
Okay, so the first initial spark was I was on writing retreat with a group of friends. I hang out with a group of other authors here in Australia, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning here, by the way. So I'm coming to you live from southeastern Australia, where it's in the future and it's morning time. And we're in the middle of winter instead of what you guys are probably entering into summer now. So I was on writing retreat, and then every winter I'd go on this writing retreat with all my friends, including people like Amy Kaufman and Jay Christoph and C.S. Pacat. And we were all sitting around in the living room, and I was between books at that stage. So I was really I was kind of like, okay, well, my books are open. I can write whatever I want. And Kat Pacat was like, well, what do you really want to write? And I said I really wanted to write a YA serial killer thriller, because, and Jen, actually, it was the Naturals that kind of, it was reading the Naturals that kind of made me feel like it was something that it was possible to do, that I could actually write a book that was set in the area of covered the area of the FBI. So I said, I want to write a YA Silence of the Lambs type story. And Kat was immediately like, yes, you should absolutely do that. And just in the way that your author friends always enable you, when you come up with these.
Doing this thing, they're like, do the thing, do the thing.
It's like, yeah, absolutely. Take this wacky idea and run with it, So I ended up, and I guess I'd always had the idea of writing this kind of story because I read books like Mindhunter by John Douglas and The Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon by Thomas Harris, back, years ago when I was first at university and first, in the first blush of youth. And they just left such an enormous impression on me. And I think I was discussing this with a friend the other night, and we were sort of talking about, like, what was the intriguing thing? Was it the serial killers? What was it? And I sort of said, well, I find the pop culture kind of obsession with serial killers pretty creepy, and although they're really interesting characters, it's actually the interaction between the hunter and the hunted that I find really interesting. It's the mindset of the detectives who wake up every morning and kind of go, okay, well, I'm going to dive into this really dark place and find out what's going on with these crimes. What's the psychology behind them? How can I profile this person to anticipate their next move. It's that mental and psychological interaction between the detective and the perpetrator that I find completely fascinating, I guess. So I think that's probably where it came from.
So much of what draws me to mysteries in general, but certainly to anything that involves profiling, is that element of getting inside, watching the characters get inside another character's head.
Yeah.
I actually, when I was a psychologist, that's one of the theories that's out there in academic psychology for why the human species likes stories. One of the theories is that the purpose of stories, the function of fiction, is sort of this practice for your theory of mind and your ability to get inside other people's heads and understand thoughts, beliefs, emotions, desires, and all this complexity. So that's actually how I came to writing naturals back in the day. Very explicitly, I was like, this stuff says we like fiction because of theory of mind. Let's do something super theory of mindy. But like you, it's also like my favorite element often of doing it, especially because if you're doing it as a writer, you have to do like extra layers.
Yes.
All that, it's like this person's getting inside this person's head, but I have to get inside both of their heads and the reader's head at the same time.
I mean, that's the thing that I always was intrigued by. It was like, here are these people who've done these horrifying things, and the detective who's obviously on the side of justice, you know, and wants to investigate, and pardon me, and find these people out and solve these crimes. But I mean, one of the key things that, you know, formed the basis of FBI behavioral science was the idea of these detectives going into jails and mental institutions and interviewing these people who'd committed these crimes. And and the thing that always fascinated me was that they had to sit down across the other side of the table from these people that they've been hunting and then work to develop a rapport with them so that they would share information. And I just found that whole aspect. It was that, like you were talking about puzzles before, and it's that like the puzzle within a puzzle within a puzzle. I mean, I guess that's the way my mind works.
All the different layers, especially because when you're doing those interviews, you have to know that this is a person who likes manipulating and controlling others.
Exactly.
Right? So that is going to be a constant element of the interviewing. And there's just so much to play with. So we've got the origin of the series now. Can you talk a little bit about the origin of book 2? So you've written book 1, you're going to write a book 2. What was the original thought or premise or spark for the second book?
Okay, so look, there might be people tuning in who don't know anything about this, or the original spark for the first book, like we discussed, and the original book is about, it's 1982. The behavioral science unit is really just in its infancy, and they decide that they need to employ these 2 teenagers who have had experience in various ways with serial offenders so that they can go into jails and asylums and interview juvenile offenders. I mean, that was one of the creepiest parts of researching these books, which is the idea that a lot of serial killers actually start like really young. Like Ted Bundy started, you know, when he was like 14, 15. And which is kind of terrifying. And in fact, they had an entire, this is a segue, where they had an entire FBI conference on juvenile serial offenders. And so, you know, that was one of the things that I researched when I was doing these books. So you have these 2 teenagers who are going into jails to interview juvenile serial killers, basically. And they bump up against this incredibly cunning, very manipulative, charming teenage sociopath called Simon Goodmanson. And he starts feeding them information that the FBI needs to help pursue a current case. And so I was in the middle, this was for Nunchuck Sleep. So I was in the middle of editing Nunchuck Sleep. We were talking about edits before too. And you know how sometimes you get stuck on an edit and then you talk to your friends. And so I was in that position when I was editing Nunchuck Sleep, and I went back to my friend Cat and said, well, this is the problem I'm having. And she was like, wouldn't it be great if the killer was like copycatting and the experience of one of these teenage interviewers, wouldn't that just like throw them completely psychologically? And how you get those experiences? And I was like, okay, that's like a completely different idea. Can we just stick to what's on the page, please? But it honestly would not leave me alone. This idea that so look, the two teenage characters. One is Travis Bell. He is a trainee U.S. Marshal. So his father was a U.S. Marshal, and his father was killed in the line of duty by a serial killer. And then Emma Lewis is his partner, and Emma's experience is that she is basically a real life final girl. So she was abducted at 16 by a serial killer who had a number of victims in the lead up to her abduction, and she was the 10th girl that he abducted. And then she managed to escape and go for help, and so that was how he was kind of caught, I guess. And so the idea of sending her back into this really fairly traumatic experience of her life, and this is 3 years later, I just couldn't get past how interesting that would be psychologically for the plot and for all the characters, and how much that would impact on Emma and her relationship with Travis, her partner, and how it would, how something like that would work. It was just fascinating to me. So I was like, yeah, I really got to write this. And so that was how Some Shall Break ended up coming into being.
I love that. First of all, I love that your writing friends get like call outs on every single one of these, because they're like, how did this happen? Like, I was talking to my friend, because that's so that way. And that's the most wonderful thing, right? About having people who are used to living in imaginary worlds and bumping up walls and just like get it.
So they can talk to you like you talk about your characters like they're real people, and they just think that's completely normal.
Do you all meet in public? Because I've had this problem before. Like, I once walked into a Panera. I was on the phone with a writing friend, and I was like, I think I might kill someone today. I'm just not sure who. And then I paused. I was like, I mean, a character in this book. I'm going to kill a character in this book. In case anyone's watching and freaking out, this was more than a decade ago. So I'm not talking about any characters you might know or love.
It's good to be specific like that. Yeah. And it's sort of goes back to the old, like, please don't look at my search history.
Yes.
Like, I'll be on a lot of watch lists, obviously, for all of the things that I'm looking up. But yeah, I do get into these conversations. I mean, look, that's one of the cool things about working with other authors and having a community of other authors around, is that you do get to bounce ideas off each other and collaborate on different things, especially when you're on deadline and things are really tight. It's really opens up a whole different world when you've got like 4, 5, 6 other people all saying, well, what about if you did this? Or what about if you did this?
It's just, that is the best. And when I, don't have that, when I'm like at home, I'm like, what do I have to like call someone to get on? So I wanted to pick up. So it's interesting because the fact that you made the book 2 plot so personal to one of your characters ties into something. So long ago, I made a PowerPoint, which I couldn't find tonight because I was going to pull a bunch from it. So I had to pull from memory, but it was called like my series writing survival guide.
Yeah, right.
Like all the things, it was a reminder of all the things I can do as an author to make writing sequels easier for me.
I want to see this PDF. Like,
I wrote down what I remembered, and I'm going to ask
it to me when this is over.
I'm going to ask you about each of them, because you've already hit on one of them, which I actually already had. It's down my little list of questions, because one of them is, especially when you're writing these kinds of books, remembering that the plots can't get less personal as time goes on.
That's right.
That the plots have to be personal. And that's something I bumped up again and again against in the Natural series, because it's like book 1 was personal to one character. What do you do for book 2? Yeah, so it was also copycat of a serial killer. Because you're like, how can you make it personal? You're like, that's what it is. And then book 3, how is it personal? Book 4, so it's this kind of, is there, like this one seems like a really clean fit that passes that litmus test just right away and gives you so much of what the book is going to be.
I mean, one of the things that you find, and you've probably bumped up against this problem too, which is when you're writing crime fiction for teenagers and you're going to have teenage protagonists, you need to find a really good excuse for them to be there, like for them to be in this situation. In fact, I remember when I first started, like with my first book, Every Breath, that was literally the first question that I had to answer, is like, for what good reason would these teenagers be involved with this incredibly adult world of police investigation? And I think, that's always the first hurdle. How do you get them involved? And then how do you keep them involved when things get dangerous?
And when the smart thing for them to do would be to like cue in other people, and they're smart characters.
That's exactly right.
How do you keep dragging the teenagers back to the center of it?
How do you keep them centered? That's right. And how do you keep giving them agency? Like how do you give them the opportunity to make the decisions that move the story forward? Because that's the key thing about YA, is that the teenagers have to always be the ones that are making the decisions, that are making the narrative, roll, basically. So I think, in Nunchuck Sleep, I think some people have sort of said, well, that's really pushing, the bounds of my ability to lift disbelief, the idea that the FBI would hire these teenagers. And it was like, well, yeah, but they were doing some really strange and wacky things in that first 10 years of the behavioral science unit, like even the idea of interviewing in jails, here's the jail where Charles Manson is being held. Let's go and talk to him. I mean, they were just doing this off the cuff. They didn't have all the permissions. If you've watched Mindhunter, the TV show Mindhunter, you'll know that they were just kind of like, well, this is an interesting thing that might be useful. Let's try that. Let's see what's happening. So I sort of thought, okay, it is plausible in that first 10 years that they would do something as out there as hire teenagers to interview teenage killers. So I was like, okay, so I can work with that. But then you're right, with each successive story, the plot influences have to become more attuned to the characters. Otherwise it's too easy for them to just kind of say, oh, actually, I'm just going to go home and do my homework now.
And also, like, in terms of centering them, I remember, so for the first 2 books of the Naturals series, they were only supposed to work cold cases, and then they had to like sneak on to the active cases.
Yes.
And after doing that for 2 books, when I was like, how are these teenagers sneaking on and secretly solving? Like, I was like, after the first 2 books, into book 2, I'm like, guess what? They've been greenlit to work active cases, because I am not like having to do the, we're just going to, by book 3, accept that they're going to be working these cases, and you make it realistic. There's some safeguards in case, but the 2 books, that tap dancing of being like, okay, why is the teenager the one chasing down this clue or doing
That's right.
It's so hard.
I mean, unless you make it personal for them, there is no reason for them to hang on, or more to the point, there's no reason for the adults around them to kind of let them be involved. So in Some Shall Break, the fact that the killer in that story is copycatting the modus operandi of the serial killer who abducted Emma, puts her dead center of the investigation. So and the FBI have to
center regardless, because if you're copycatting, the person who got away is also the biggest target.
She is the biggest target. So they bring her in, they put her in protective custody, and then she's not a character who can just sit in a room and wait for it all to be over. So, I tried to establish that very clearly in book 1, that she is the kind of person who would, she would literally be gnawing her fingernails off in that situation. She would be like pacing a hole in the floor. So she needs to be in action. And the idea that she might have some insight into the psychology and the behavior of somebody who's doing the sort of things that her abductor did, from the start, is not completely beyond the realms of possibility. So yeah, it definitely puts her dead center. And it also makes it so much more interesting psychologically. She's already under a lot of stress. She's already dealing with trauma, from her earlier experience. So putting her back into that situation where it's 3 years after, she feels like she's in recovery. She feels like she's kind of reached a point where, okay, I can deal with things. I can deal with my life. And then to throw her back into it again disrupts all of that recovery, trauma recovery work that she's done. So that was really, really interesting to play with. And, that sort of stuff just fascinates me.
So here's a question for you, which ties into what you're talking about Emma's backstory. So another rule on my sequel writing survival guide is characters always have backstories. And in book 1 just becomes part of the backstory. So you only need to know things from book 1 that you would have mentioned if there'd never been a book.
Yes, that's right.
So part of my question is, so obviously with the plot of this book, like Emma's backstory from 3 years ago is hugely significant and at the forefront. But what role, if any, do you think the events of book 1, like if you jumped straight to writing book 2 and there'd never been a book 1, what would have been different for sort of Emma and for the character and how she's approaching it and how you approached it if you didn't have that book 1 backstory?
I think the main thing, you would still have the two central players. You would still have Travis Bell and Emma Lewis. And Travis is, also recovering from his own issues around serial murders. And he is trying, everything, every tool that he has to try and support his partner. So you still have that really nice dynamic between them. And then they're also kind of trying to figure out, like, yeah, we've been connected like this emotionally for a long time. Maybe there's something a bit more here. And meanwhile, you've got the crimes going on, but without None Shall Sleep, you wouldn't have Simon Goodmanson, who is the juvenile sociopath who they met in book 1, who started, doing the thing which psychopaths do, which is inserting themselves into investigations and attention seeking and kind of drawing attention to themselves because they like to be on center stage. So Simon is this incredibly bright. He's incredibly intelligent, and he really knows how to pull people's strings. He's one of those people who he's just so far ahead of everybody else in the room. Like he's how you have those plots where people are sort of say, oh, well, you don't have to think too hard about it. They're not playing 4-dimensional chess. Simon's playing 4-dimensional chess. I know that very well. and so you kind of underestimate his ability to do that at your peril. So the fact that in Some Shall Break, we have somebody who's doing the same sort of things that Emma's abductor in 1979, but he's also incorporating a few other elements, and one of those elements is he's posing the bodies in public. Used to do when he was in his heyday, as they say, before he got locked up. So that forces them to go back to him and try and find out more about how posing works, within a criminal case. I mean that stuff is really interesting too. I had to do a lot of research on why. I mean, look, we could go down a very deep rabbit hole, which would probably freak a lot of people out about offenders who kill people and then pose them, in public places or in private, wherever they leave the bodies. But that's the sort of thing that Simon did. So having him back and having him kind of drilling into Emma Lewis's skull with, his ability to kind of, he's just going to keep poking at her soft spots until something cracks, because he just does that stuff for fun.
So to write Simon, how much do you have to know about his 4-dimensional chess? Do you have to like know everything about what he's doing going into the scene, or are you kind of discovering elements of it along the way?
Look, it seems to be a recurring problem that I continue to write characters who are way smarter than me. I don't know. I'm really attracted to these characters who are like super intelligent. And in Simon's case, he's super intelligent, but he uses his powers for evil. And yeah, I do plot out as much as I possibly can. That was something that I learned from writing None Shall Sleep, which is that I really do have to know where Simon's end game is going. But I mean, you would have this experience too, which is that you'll be writing it and then you'll have this pristine plotting kind of outline, and then something will happen and the character will just be like, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this other thing.
Then you're like, replotting it all. That's why I go through like 3 journals per draft of just entirely like redrawing my same structure charts over.
Oh my God.
When they all get thrown off.
And look, it's always the antagonist, it's always the villain. I mean, and particularly with Simon is just, he is always the character that I'm like, every time I will be like, okay, we're going to turn this way. And Simon's like, no, actually we're not. We're going to do the other thing. So I kind of feel like a bit helpless, but if I let the characters lead me in that way, I always seem to come up with something good. So I can't ignore that. I can't just like trammel over the top of that. I have to be kind of going, actually, this character has kind of taken on a life of his own now, and I'm just along for the ride.
There's a study that I read years ago on what the academic authors called the illusion of independent agency. And it was
really?
the idea of fiction authors perceiving the characters as having minds of intentions of their own.
That's super cool. I want to read that too. Send me that.
It was really interesting, where people actually were like spontaneously reporting, I planned this, but the character wanted to do this, or just came on. Or I'm always doing the thing, like even if I plan out like a chapter, like I just have my bullet points and I've got the chapter blocked out. Then I go to write the chapter and then I'm like, oh, this thing I thought was going to happen 10 chapters from now. That guy just said it now. And then I'm like, okay, got to like redo what the plan was. So I keep planning stuff and then keep having to constantly modify the plan.
It's like I think people kind of underestimate how much authors just kind of follow. I mean, look, people underestimate how much authors just kind of follow along with the characters. Like once you've got this established character and you've built their whole psychology and their whole backstory and background, and you know how they were raised and what their parents were like and all that sort of stuff, you kind of have to let them off the reins. You have to let them go and see what happens, because quite often that's where the fun stuff happens.
And it's so interesting because I have met authors who actually never do, like it always goes exactly. I've met the people who it goes as that it's planned.
And who are these people?
Years ago on Tumblr, I did a survey about the illusion of independent agency, just anecdotally.
Yeah.
And some authors reported it strongly. Some reported, semi, like I'm still in charge, but I'll get ideas about what they're thinking. And then some authors were like, nope, never had anything like it ever. So there's there's huge variation in it, though it sounds like you and I are probably pretty similar in being like very detailed planners and then also completely throwing away major elements of the plan constantly.
I'm really intrigued by all this stuff. I mean, this is all kind of going into like authory stuff now. But I've got some friends. I have a number of friends. I mean, I am a very visual author as well, and I have a number of author friends who have aphantasia, so they have no visual image. Really? Are you one of the? Are you? Yeah, that's amazing. See that? that's like a whole different ball game for me. I'm just kind of like, how does that even work? Oh my God. So there's this really interesting spectrum of how this all works for people. Everyone seems to have their own strategies around it for aphantasia, but I guess people would have the same strategies around character agency. I really want to read that PDF.
The Illusion of Independent Agency. I can send it to you if
Yeah,
I can find it.
absolutely.
I don't have
Please.
academic access anymore, but I probably have it on a computer somewhere.
That would be amazing.
Okay, so I think I have time for like one more question before
Okay.
Stephanie pops back in. So I will give you two choices of two items off the series writer survival guide about which one you'd rather talk about. One
Okay.
is with each additional sequel, new characters, and new characters bring new conflicts, which I think originally Allie Carter pointed out, like how they had a new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher every year.
Yeah,
the day with Harry Potter, or someone like, so new characters bringing in new conflicts, or new characters bringing in a new dimension. And the second one was one I looked at, which is in some sense the world gets bigger. So either one of those spark something for you.
So I have to choose between one
or
of those?
I mean, if we have time, you can do both. But I think we're right at 7:40, so it might be getting close to audience questions.
Might be getting close. I mean, look, I tend to go with
you can do both,
new. Steph. I can do both. That's cool. Look, I do tend to go along with the new characters because I mean, that's the beauty of setting your book within the FBI, within some sort of government agency where you have a bureaucracy above you, and then you have this like rolling cast of characters who like, oh, well, this person's been transferred. Now you're talking to this person. So I do a little bit of that. And that's a lot of fun. But one of the things that I've discovered with this book 3, which I'm kind of in the middle of working on at the moment, is I'm trying to say it without giving too much away because I don't want to give anyone any spoilers. But I have set a few scenes of the third book in this series in other countries. So I did expand the world a little bit for the third book. The
world getting bigger.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of nice. But one thing I discovered about psychological thrillers, like with None Shall Sleep and Some Shall Break, is when you want to really keep that tension and intensity up, keeping the focus tight is really important. Yeah. So although expanding the world is interesting, it's kind of visually interesting, I guess, for the reader. For me, like having a new character and a new crime to solve is probably enough on lots of levels. Yeah. Because if the lens widens too much, then I feel like I can't keep that tension.
Yeah, especially since you have your core trio kind of. So
yeah, that's right. So I have Travis, I have Emma, I have Simon, and you see a lot more of Simon's twin sister in this one.
She was who I was thinking of when I was talking about. I know she's not entirely new, but
right. Yeah.
But like new, coming more forefront or being
coming more forefront. Oh yeah, I mean that's true. That's something that is. I mean, she was like a tertiary. No, she was a secondary character in None Shall Sleep. You see a lot more. She steps right up to the forefront in Some Shall Break. And then we have our 4 core characters, and they're all kind of taking a major part of the story by the time we get to book 3.
But then for you, it would be also new villains are bringing the new killer element.
Yeah.
In. How do you, when you have a character like Simon in the book who is so dynamic and all of that, like, is there an extra level of challenge when you're coming up with the new killers and everything because you have Simon, right?
Yeah, I know. Right, he's right there. And look, he is complete scenery chewer as well. He's one of those people who'll be like always like, look at me. And he's compelling on the page. He's incredibly fun to write. Oh my God. I mean, so in some cases it's kind of like, yeah, I could just keep writing these scenes with Simon all day. But But and I mean, that was the other thing that has been intriguing to me, is to see people kind of go, oh, well, what about, like there's been a lot of people shipping Emma and Simon amongst my readers. People have been getting in touch with me, and I'm like, he's a serial killer. He's a serial killer. So I don't want to put people off, but he does tend to take over the scenes that he's in, because that's his nature. But I think he, there's always that tension between, is he being helpful, or is he actually, is he just completely evil through and through, or is there a spot of light in his darkness? And I think that's the interesting element that keeps bringing people back to him as a character, and that's what makes his continued involvement in the story interesting. The idea that, oh, is he savable, on some levels, or is he just a hopeless case, I guess. Anyway, look, I can't say too much about book 3.
I was going to say, but there is a book 3.
There is. I mean, I'm writing it. So I guess we'll see what happens with it. I mean, look, Some Shall Break nearly didn't exist. So it wasn't until None Shall Sleep had been out for a year, and I'd already pitched the idea of Some Shall Break to my publisher, and they were like, oh yeah, nah. And then None Shall Sleep had been out for nearly a year before it hit the New York Times list on the paperback release. And my original plan was, like, I was just going to release the sequel in my newsletter, like chapter by chapter, just for fun, because I had people sort of saying, oh, I want to see the end of the story. So, and then my publisher came back and was like, yeah, actually, we might publish that. So I'll be interested to see what happens with book 3, whether or not they decide they want to take it. But either way, I'm writing it. So I guess, people will find out one way or the other.
What's going on? Awesome.
I feel like I'm entering at the perfect time to say, we clearly all have our marching orders this evening of, like, we want 3. We want it. Oh no. Ellie, can you hear me?
Oh.
Oh no.
She just sent us a message that says, hi, Stephanie. I can't hear you. Can you still hear me, Ellie?
I can hear you, Jen.
Okay,
yeah,
I can translate
totally fine.
from Stephanie.
I'm going to give Jen the question.
This is going to be weird. Is Stephanie going to be giving you the
Jen,
oh my God. Okay, and Jen, you can give me the questions.
Jen, I'm going to get off so that people watching don't have to hear the question that you ask a question. And I'm going to message you the questions that we have that we're going to ask. So.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. So, Ellie, what she just said is she's going to message me the questions so that the people watching don't have to hear the questions twice.
That's
although
probably a good idea.
Like a game of telephone.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea.
Here's this question. But I will await the first question coming in.
You're really carrying the can in this event, Jen. So thank you. I appreciate it.
I enjoy talking to you so much. I feel like we have a lot of similarities in our grades and the way we approach writing. So
I am genuine about those PDFs. I really do want to read them.
Well, if it's publicly available, you can go to Google Scholar and type in "illusion of independent agency."
I'm literally writing that down right now.
Okay,
illusion of independent agency.
Here's our first audience question. What is the most random fact you've discovered from going down weird research holes?
Okay. Look, there would be a lot of things that fall into that category. Because, like, obviously when you're writing a book set in 1982, you don't just research the crimes and the FBI and stuff like that. You have to research, who was the president of the United States, what was the kind of big news stories of the day, what movies were showing in the cinema, what was the music happening, and the music was great, by the way. And one of the weird things that I got caught up on was cologne, men's cologne. Like, there's a look, you know how these things work, which is that you you have this like literal one sentence mention of some small detail that you find that you have to just dive into. There's no easy answers, and you really have to dive into it to find out what the answer to this question is so that you can add it to the sentence. So I literally spent half an afternoon, this is a good use of my author time, half an afternoon researching the most popular colognes for men in 1982. So it was super weird.
Like, oh, we've got that now. Yeah, I just always, when I'm running inheritance games, end up Googling most expensive fill in the blank in the world. So it's like, whatever you're talking about, it could be like most expensive lawn chair, most expensive nutcracker, most expensive whatever you put in there. And there's going to be an article that someone's written about the 10 most expensive versions of that things in the world.
I want to know what the most expensive lawn chair is.
I mean, I don't think I've Googled that one before, but I guarantee you if you do it, someone will have rounded up all the most expensive lawn chairs. So how was writing The Killing Code different or similar to this series?
Okay, so look, we haven't talked at all about The Killing Code, even though that book was only released in September last year. Look, The Killing Code is different because it's a different story engine. That's the authory answer. So None Shall Sleep and Some Shall Break are both like really high tension thrillers. So they had to kind of clip along at this pace, and the villain is always the person who's moving the story forward by their actions. Yeah. Whereas with The Killing Code is a mystery. So it's really kind of like, oh, now I kind of, the detective, you're following behind the detective who's picking up clues as they go along the way, and you know, as you're reading, you're kind of joining in with them. So it's a very different story engine, mystery versus thriller, in my experience. And also The Killing Code, because it's a mystery, it doesn't have to be such a cracking pace. So I get to linger on like beautiful 1943 details, like, you know, the gorgeous clothes that women used to wear in the 1940s during World War II, and what sort of martinis you could buy in Washington, D.C. in 1943, and, you know, all what sort of nightclubs people used to go to. You know, that was all the stuff that I really loved. So in some ways, The Killing Code was a great break, you know, from writing this incredibly tense, like, now we have to keep moving forward constantly for the None Shall Sleep sequence.
Let's see. Follow-up question for both of us. If you were to write outside of your current genre, what would it be?
Have you got an answer for that one, Jen?
I've written in a bunch of different genres. So before I was a mystery thriller writer, which I've been doing for more than 10 years now, I did a lot of paranormal.
Yeah.
I came into YA with what they at the time called chick lit back in the day.
Yeah, right.
I've done a lot of kind of hopping around. I think the one genre that I'm probably most drawn to that I haven't written yet is high fantasy. So I read a lot of YA high fantasy. When I'm approaching writing realistic fiction, I've got a lot of like I'm often trying to capture the vibe of my favorite high fantasies. So I'll be like, it's like that kind of court politics, but here. Or it's like they have superpowers, but it turns out they're just like prodigies at theory of mind. And so like I'm always kind of doing that kind of thing. So I think someday in the far, far future, I'd like to do a high fantasy.
I would actually love to see you tackle a high fantasy. I would totally read that.
It would probably also be a mystery, because once you start writing mysteries, everything looks like a mystery.
That's exactly right. I have tried, I've dabbled in contempt for one book, and I literally could not. I was literally contacting my editor saying, can I just put one dead body in? Just one. And they were like, all right, you're going to have one dead body. But that was really fun. So I wrote across a number of genres in short stories before I started writing YA crime. And I would really love to write some horror. I'm kind of dabbling, I'm sort of playing around with a horror novel idea at the moment. That would be, I actually do read a lot of horror. I mean, some people are saying that with the nudge of sleep sequence, I'm kind of already writing horror, but I would really like to do some like proper, out there horror. That would be amazing.
Let's see. What is most exciting to you about YA mystery thrillers? What excites you about the future of the genre?
I don't know. Look, for me, it's always about what do the readers find appealing about the story, and why do they keep coming back? And my feeling is that teenagers have, they're very familiar with fear. Being a teenager is a very anxiety-producing time. It's a time of all of the firsts. The first time you get a job, the first time you get your driver's license, the first time you fall in love. And you're kind of staring down the barrel of adulthood, and it's intense. I mean, I've got teenagers at home, and they're still, I can see how scary it is on a lot of levels. So for me, obviously we've just lived through a couple of years of very scary times. So I think for me, it's about answering that kind of need in teenage readers, that they want to sort of see these fears played out in maybe on a larger stage or with a larger concept, and at the end of it they can sort of feel like, they can take a big exhale and feel like a bit of cathartic release, I guess, in some ways, that these teenage characters can handle these tough situations and get through it. Then maybe I can go for my driving test tomorrow and it'll be fine.
Yeah, I when you mentioned first, I've always, one of my recent theories has been that one thing that drives me to write YA, but also some people to read YA, is that it's a category of origin stories.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing that makes it hard, right? Because we were talking earlier about how you have to drag the character to the center of the mystery, and you're constantly fighting to keep them there because it's YA. Whereas, like, you write an adult mystery, and you're like, why is he the one solving this mystery? You're like, because he's the greatest detective in the world. He's Sherlock Holmes. I wouldn't be so, or so you can
because that's his job.
That's the hard thing, but one of the beautiful things about it is that means you're also like writing this arc of this person who is in the process of becoming. They haven't become they haven't become what they're going to be.
Yeah.
And I love the process of that. So like I saw the Inheritance games, the initial trilogy was Avery's origin story. It was taking her from sleeping in the car to, one of the most powerful women on the planet. And what's that evolution look like? And it just feels like there's so much space from that in YA.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel very lucky that I get to write in YA and that people keep reading. I mean, this Some Short Break would not exist without the readers. So that's
very, very thankful for readers, and very, very thankful that readers of YA too are really open to different possibilities, even within a favorite genre.
Yes.
So right now I'm really loving playing with okay, how can I build out this world and this story, and serializing different things versus episode. There's just, it's the sky's the limit, and you can try so many different things because the readership is open to lots of different things, which is very freeing.
They're okay. So they're okay to try new things all the time.
Okay, so these are 2 lightning round questions for you. The first one is, so which of these 2 movies do you prefer? I have not seen either of them, so you're
Oh, really?
You have. The movies are The Bone Collector and Seven.
I'm going to go for Seven.
Okay.
Like I said, I lean towards horror, so that is that is actually really one of the most horrifying films I've ever seen, and it has a scene in it which just recurs to me all the time. So that's probably definitely down my alley.
Yeah, for someone who writes murdery stuff sometimes, I'm a total wuss. So
And we were discussing this the other day. I was with some horror friends and we were like, oh, okay, so are you, there's like 2 horror camps. Are you the person who is like completely desensitized to everything and you'll just watch everything? Or are you like this person who is scared of everything? And I was like, yeah, I'm scared of everything. I just like watch this stuff to scare myself and feel better afterwards.
No. Okay, same question about TV shows, NCIS or SVU?
Oh, that's so hard. But it would have to be SVU.
I would go NCIS. I've only seen a couple episodes of SVUs. I've
I used
only
to
seen
write-
like 2 episodes.
Oh, really? You've
Yeah.
only seen a couple.
And I saw like 9 seasons of NCIS. So.
I used to write NCIS fan fiction. No, for
Actually,
real.
I am more familiar with the SVU characters from reading some SVU crossovers.
Oh, seriously?
A Buffy the Vampire Slayer SVU crossover I read like 15 years ago.
Now you're talking my language. Now you're talking my language.
Okay. And yeah. I think that is it.
Hello.
Thank you so much.
This has been Ellie. I'm assuming you still can't hear me. Yep. Perfect. Jen, thank you so much. You did such an amazing job. I am like just dying. I have the biggest smile on my face from just like listening to you two talk. This has been so fun to listen to. I really want to follow up with Ellie about her NCIS fan fiction. I imagine I'm not going to be the only person who wants to do that. But to everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, these are 2 incredible authors. I know I said at the top that we have copies of Some Shall Break that we are more than happy to send to you. We ship internationally and nationally. But I also did not say at the top, but is also true, that we can ship any of Jen's books to you as well. We are absolutely in love with all of her books, not just the Inheritance Game series. Big fans of the Naturals. And so just truly thank you both so much for being here this evening. Thank you everyone for watching. And yeah, have a great rest of your evenings until our next virtual event, which will happen in July. So please watch on all of our socials. We do all of our announcements there as well as our website. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you so much, Ellie. Have a great rest of your night.
All right. Bye.